Hello and welcome to this episode of G-Talk, Ask the Expert. GLP is a leading global investment manager and business builder, investing in, developing and managing assets in logistics real estate. In Europe, GLP operates in 12 countries with over 270 assets under management, totaling 7.9 million square metres, with another 1 million square metres under development. Today's subject is logistics in France, and joining me to discuss this is expert in the field Philippe Graziani, who is GLP's Country Director for France. Hello, Philippe.
Hello, Paul.
Perhaps we could start by finding out a bit about you and your work.
Of course. So I have 25 years experience in the real estate industry, mainly in asset management. And I joined GLP in 2019 as a senior director for asset management and investment. And I was promoted to head of country just over a year ago.
Okay, well, before we come to what GLP is working on in France, let's set the scene by looking at the French logistics market overall.
Sure. France is EU's second largest consumer market and second largest economy behind Germany. France is strategically positioned between Northern and Southern Europe and therefore benefits from that position as a getaway from mainland Europe to the UK. French logistic market is the second in Europe and probably the sixth biggest in the world as far as I know, especially a very mature market with more than 45 million square meters of logistic space. Currently, it is really acutely undersupplied, and this is evidenced by a national vacancy rate of 4%.
Okay, so 96% leased occupancy rate at the moment. Like you say, it's got the central location, that famously l'Hexagone, all the countries that it borders around France. What about the inland infrastructure?
So high-speed rail network in France is the second largest in Europe. And regarding the roads, we have in excess of 1 million kilometers of roads, among which 12,000 kilometers of motorways. Okay,
and France is a big European country. It's more than twice the size of the UK. Are there differences in the kinds of logistics operations in different parts of the country?
Well, logistics activities are primarily concentrated around two main channels. The first one is known as the French corridor, which basically links 4 regions from north to south. So namely Lille in the north, and then going through Paris, so Greater Paris region, the Rhône, the Greater Lyon region, and Marseille. And then apart from that French corridor, which is really the traditional French logistic market, you have what we call the Atlantic Arc, which is more the western corridor of France, which basically links Spain in the south to Bordeaux and Nantes, and to what is one of the major ports in France, Le Havre.
Yeah, so you've got those 3 ports on the west coast, Le Havre, Nantes and Bordeaux, and you're saying that western corridor then goes down to Spain and links it up to Spain and all the Spanish consumers there. What's been happening then in the French logistics market in 2022?
Well, I would say that the two keywords are really resilience and performance, because despite the war in Ukraine that broke out in February, we have seen unprecedented amount of capital injected in logistics real estate, over 2 billion. So that was a record year despite the global context. I would say that numbers, which are true for the first half of 2022, probably don't reflect recent market developments, but it clearly establishes logistics sector as one of the main investment targets of international investors.
Okay, so where does GLP in France fit into all of this?
Well, in France, we have the ambition to join the top 5 companies in the logistics real estate. Over the 5-6 months of the year, GLP French team has been very active in acquisition, with more than 500 million euros invested in France. For example, we had the Trio portfolio, of which 11 of the 18 properties that made up the portfolio are located in France. And then a few pure French investments, one located in Ablaincourt-Pressoir in the north of Paris, one in Derval, and a multimodal 100,000 square meters warehouse located in Denain, currently under construction.
And whereabouts is Denain?
Denain is located in the north of France, so really close to Lille, one of the top 4 markets what is interesting is that it is a forward funding, and we bought that spec because we do have a conviction on those really central markets. And so we decided to take a further risk on that investment. The good news is that we see really quite a big number of occupiers inquiries, and we are very confident that this will be let at least partially before completion.
Okay, so that's two big things that the GLP team has been doing. One was an acquisition with the Trio portfolio, and then these development on spec. Philippe, what is your approach to the French market? What is your strategy?
That's a very good question. We clearly need to adapt our strategy to the changing market. I mean, we talked earlier about the first half of 2022, and the market is completely different post-summer because of the global context. So basically, we have put in place a two-stage strategy, but the key word is that we are open for business. We have capital to deploy, and we will definitely remain focused on growth of our portfolio in France through both development and acquisition, but probably with a more proactive, always, but disciplined approach just to cope with the new market conditions. The eventual objective is to reach the 2 million square meters mark under management by the end of 2023. And so we will be focusing on both development and investment. In investment first, we want to be proactive and remain proactive. Sourcing is key. So depending on the opportunities, we'll be able to position ourselves across portfolios or obsolete assets where we can possibly create value upon carrying out work, doing any improvement to create value on those assets. And the second leg of our strategy would be the development. And I think that has even become the priority for France, because in the eyes of the market, we want to remain what is the DNA of GLP, because we are developers initially. By the end of 2023, we already are securing a portfolio of almost 250,000 square meters. And we feel that, with the occupier market, which is still really holding up very well, and the supply of logistics space that becomes more and more difficult, we expect rental values to rise. The long-term objective for France is to develop 150,000 square meters per annum.
Okay, so you've got quite ambitious targets there for your development pipeline. As you say, 150,000 square metres a year in the medium term, but in the short term, nearly 250,000 square metres. You're also looking to buy opportunistically any of the available assets that you think you can add value to. What about the team? Who have you got on the ground who are doing all this work for you?
So we are 19 in the Paris team. Basically, we have in GLP and across Europe a very lean and agile organization, especially compared to most of our competitors. So local teams are in charge of deal sourcing, implementation, construction of our development and asset management. And what is really making GLP a strong organization, and as we are backed by a solid core European team, mainly based in London.
Okay, so you've got that collaboration across all the GLP teams in the different countries. ESG is an increasing priority for investors as well as your customers. What's your approach in France to ESG, which is environmental, social and governance?
Well, sustainability and ESG in general in the conception and construction of our properties is key. So we are working on the BREEAM, a very good up to excellent standards in France. And in all our development, we strive to preserve the local biodiversity.
Okay. What about the market demand? How do you see that in 2, 5, 10 years' time?
Well, I think it's a long way off. It's already quite difficult at the moment to project what the market will be in 3 months' time. What we see is that construction costs have increased sharply over the last 2 years. War in Ukraine and its consequences in energy prices, the inflation, challenges on the supply chain. So we are definitely in uncertain times. Said like that, it draws up quite a dark environment. But when it comes to real estate logistics, we clearly observe lately some deals renegotiated or sometimes not going through to the final signing operations being postponed to such extent that some investors have decided to wait for better conditions to sell their assets. So my conviction is that market volatility will create opportunities to be seized, and I think that GLP is very well placed for that. But the sky is the limit. It's coming to an end, and that's probably we have a more balanced market ahead of us, which is probably for the best.
Okay, so as you say, there is a lot of challenges at the moment in terms of the economy generally. But what trends can you see emerging in logistics?
I can see three trends from where I stand. The first is the structural e-commerce growth. We've seen that penetration rate has accelerated in Europe following COVID-19, even if we're still lagging US and China. Currently in Western Europe, we stand at 16%, with a 10% annual growth expected until 2025. Interestingly, Savis has identified a tipping point to be 10.7% of total online retail sales, at which point you can see a rapid growth in operational demand for warehouse space. I think that's really interesting, and this is something that we already observed in the main European economies, including France.
That's a rapid growth in e-commerce. What else can you see?
Supply chain onshoring and transition from that just-in-time to the just-in-case are really driving robust demand for logistics space. We see supply chain disruption that has led to a record buildup of safety inventory, and that has clearly boosted demand for logistics space. And this is what CBRE observes when they talk about reshoring and nearshoring strategies. Increased storage aimed at preventing any further supply chain difficulties, which will drive the need for more logistics space.
Yes, people want their critical manufacturing and supply chain bits close to them. So that is driving a demand. How are you going to meet that demand for logistics space?
What we will try is build more assets to cope with that demand. And that brings me to the third, probably, trends that I see as the structural land scarcity and the constrained supply. In France, particularly, the administrative process has become increasingly difficult. As a result, the production cycle for a warehouse is much longer, and that really causes a structural demand versus supply imbalance, which will, in the long term, fuel the rental growth. Actually, this is already happening, and this has driven a 7% increase in prime headline rental value since 2017.
The industrial zoning in France, they've accredited 127 sites across France, but you're saying that still doesn't feed through into the supply of development land.
Yeah, well, this is the current situation that we can see, and it is becoming every year more and more difficult to find the land and to get the proper authorization to develop warehouses. So I think that trend is here to stay, and it's probably going to get even harder in the next years to build logistics warehouse.
Okay, so what's your immediate focus going to be in the coming months?
Well, primarily concentrating on the development pipeline. We have ongoing projects in the west of France, and hopefully more to come across all the French territory. A few projects that are currently ongoing for France are Le Havre, so one of the main French ports that we mentioned earlier.
Yes.
Autrèche, located in the west of France, near Tours, and Chéret, near Le Mans, in the west of France as well.
So tell us a little bit about the projects that you have in France.
Currently, we have 4 projects. One under construction in Saint-Martin-de-Crau, which is one of the main French logistic. GLP owns more than 300,000 square meters of warehouse space.
That's in the south, isn't it, near Marseille?
Absolutely. This is near Marseille. Other than Saint-Martin, we have a few projects that will be coming up in 2023. One in Le Havre, so one of the main ports that I mentioned earlier, and 2 other projects in Autrèche and Chéret, respectively near cities Tours and Le Mans.
Yeah, so Tours is in the middle of France, Le Havre is the big Atlantic port, and Le Mans is slightly to the north of France, well known to all of those people who love classic cars and car racing generally. What about these facilities? What distinguishes you and GLP from your competitors?
Well, as we said before, each of those facilities will offer customers benefits and construction standards that distinguish GLP from the competition. That includes excellent accessibility, as well as one very important item, which is the labor pools for the future occupiers. And of course, as we said before, sustainable construction.
Okay. And what sort of inquiries are you getting for these projects?
Well, actually, we got quite a lot of inquiries coming in from different types of potential customers. We can quote retailers, industrial companies, manufacturers, e-merchants, and when they do not rent directly the warehouses, then they can do that through 3PL. 3PL are just third-party logistics, i.e. specialized company providing transport, storage, services to occupiers who prefer to outsource their logistics.
Well, it sounds like you're going to be very busy. Any final thoughts? How would you summarize what's going on in France?
Well, halfway through this podcast, we discuss our priorities. So if I summarize, development, investment, and ESG.
Well, thank you very much, Philippe, for sharing your expertise with us today. Philippe Graziani, Country Director of France.
Thank you, Paul.
That's it. That's all we've got time for. My name is Paul Shearer. Have a lovely day. Thanks for listening to this episode of G-Talk Ask the Expert. You can find other episodes in this series in all the usual podcast places. Be sure to subscribe. You can also find out more on GLP Europe's website, eu.glp.com.